Hey everybody, Mark here. I want to talk about another tip that'll help you at the Classic or any fishing tournament, kayak fishing tournament really. It's scoring your fish. Here's a couple of tips. Number one, make sure your ruler is certified and that it's okay with your tournament director to use the ruler. That's number one. Number two, if you have a ruler like a hog trough or a yak gear ruler or anything that doesn't come with the numbers marked, make sure you take the time to clearly mark the numbers. That's very, very important. Because in the sunlight, bright days, or if you have a flash on your camera, it's very difficult to see the numbers sometimes. Also, if you're using the catch board, make sure the board is dry. That's a highly reflective surface. And if the board is wet, like if you fish or water, and you take a picture in the sun, it'll white out those numbers. And on the catch board, the numbers are simply in the middle, not the top and the bottom. So sometimes you can lose inches or whatever if your board is wet. Overall, it's a great board. Just make sure your board's dry. So mark your numbers. Make sure the board's approved. A couple of tips too with the hog trough. Write your name on it. That way, if you lose it or it flies out, somebody hopefully will return it. I added wooden dowels. I recommend that you do that. I think these are 1/4-inch wooden dowels. They fit in that groove perfectly. That creates more rigidity to the board, so it's easier to put it in your lap. It doesn't flex, or put it up. Depending on your kayak, you can put it up on the sides and it'll stay rigid. Also, I added, it's called Frost King. It's foam tubing that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. I know about it because I'm a painter, and if you have big gaps in a house, you put this in first. That way you're just not shooting tubes and tubes and tubes of caulk in there to seal it up to paint it. But what that does is it makes the board actually float. So if I drop this over, it'll bob up and down like this because there's just enough Frost King foam in there to pick up the board. So a couple of tips there. The other thing you want to do is make a black line here at the vertical bar. We like that because it's easier to see when the nose of the fish touches the board. So it's obvious that it's always flush with the vertical board. Also, ask your tournament director or look in the rules whether you can use grippers in the photo, depending on the species of fish. Sometimes that's acceptable, sometimes it's not. Also, make sure that you keep the mouth closed and the tail straight. You can pinch the tail. At our event, we prefer it. That way, both tips of the tails get on the board, so it's easier to score. But ask your tournament director, read the rules. Know the rules before you start. So that's a huge tip. Another tip that you're going to want to know is, and this is very important, and I've been guilty of it myself, score every fish until you get a bigger fish. Like if you pre-fished the day before, let's say me and I'm fishing for speckled trout. It's a trout tournament, speckled trout. And we've been catching 18, 19-inch trout. The first fish I catch of the day is 16 inches, but the sun's coming up and I'm in a hurry to catch a bigger one. I'll just flip that fish off the board and keep fishing. Well, that might be the only trout I catch all day. Might be the only trout caught all day, period. And I've just thrown it off the boat because I'm going to catch a bigger one. Score that fish. If you catch a 16 1/4, one bigger, score that fish. If you go back and catch another 15, you can just quickly let him go because you've already got a bigger fish on the film, on the roll, whatever you call it, digitally line. So anyway, score every fish until you get a bigger fish. Take a second before you release the fish to make sure your photo is good. And what I mean by that is so that your tournament director who's scoring the fish can see the whole fish, the vertical, the mouth's closed, whatever rules. Take a quick look at that before you let it go. I've had tournaments where, bam, I take the picture, drop the fish over, and I realize, oh no, I cut off the tail, or oh, you can't see this. Make sure, take that extra 2 or 3 seconds, quickly look through before you let that fish go. And then lastly, and this is a weird thing too, but it may affect you, is find out if there's a minimum for the tournament. Some tournaments, it's a 12-inch minimum on bass, or 12-inch on bass, or 15, or whatever. For the Classic, as long as you catch it on hook and line, there's no minimum. So you may say, well, why would I score a 7-inch fish? Well, the reason you'd score 7-inch fish is some years it's difficult to get the slam, redfish, flounder, and speckled trout. And a 7-inch trout or an 8-inch trout or a little small flounder can be the difference. Well, you say, well, wait a minute, the lines only start at 8. What if I catch a 7 3/4 inch trout? You can't see it if I butt it up. That's a very good question. This fish is obviously longer than that. And again, I just use this for purposes of demonstrating king mackerel stuff, but we're going to pretend that this is 7.5 inch fish. What we want you to do, and we'll tell you this, is you put the nose of that fish at 10 inches. That way we can see something in the beginning, we know where you started, and then we can see where the tail is. If it's less than 8 inches. But score every fish you catch until you get a large one. Because again, you never know when that fish is going to make the difference.